It's November the 19th, late in the evening, 2021, of course. I'll probably be releasing this in the morning. But basically, well, I guess it's been a great day. Kyle Rittenhouse has been found not guilty on all five counts. And after a very long jury deliberation, I think this is really good news, obviously. Um, Obviously, good news for him, and I think kind of it reinforces the idea of self-defense law, which I think is kind of important. Obviously, anything in one case isn't in one state isn't going to definitely shape the entire situation on that subject, but nonetheless, so since it has such national attention, I think it's an important thing. And basically, it's kind of interesting the things that came out today. I think it's we learned a lot more about it. That the jury took almost all week to come to a conclusion, and we kind of heard from the defense attorneys today, and they were of the opinion that they saw the case was probably heading to a hung jury or to some kind of compromised verdict, and they were obviously very worried. And I think they probably should be. And my own opinion is, and we'll see if this bears out, is that there were at least a couple of people on the jury. I'm not sure if it's more than that, but probably two, who really were not too keen on the self-defense argument and probably were originally oriented toward conviction, I think. And I think there's probably a strong majority that probably saw just how weak the prosecution's case was and saw it as self-defense. There's probably also the fact that a lot of these people are from the area and really probably had a pretty negative attitude on the rioters anyhow. And by the way, I just want to mention if you like these videos, please subscribe if you have a YouTube account, or you can set one up. And a like is always helpful with the algorithm. So anyhow, I just wanted to get on with this. I thought that was an interesting development. I know that on the last day, one of the ladies, which I believe is one of the ones that was kind of holding out, that's just a guess, but we'll see, asked to take home the jury instructions in order to study them. And I think that was probably the breaking point on the case being settled. That's just my opinion. That when they actually read the law and carefully, with a little peace and quiet, they began to realize that the self-defense argument was the valid legal answer. That the state had to prove when self-defense claimed that self-defense wasn't the issue beyond a reasonable doubt, and that's so that's a fairly high standard for self-defense. Obviously, this is kind of a result of some of these reaction to these things where somebody's defending themselves and they had some the person ends up being prosecuted, and they said they had to retreat or something, so they got rid of things like that. And I think it worked out pretty good on that subject. And of course, another interesting thing that came out, which we didn't know, but was that they did actually have a pretty good defense team. Actually, I didn't know. I guess they raised quite a bit of money for this defense, and they actually had a psychologist who was a jury expert there that observed the jury's reactions and it scored which jurors they would rather have than others and things like that, and all that. And they also had two mock trials before, I guess, kind of a focus group juries of people that they just selected for a focus group, I guess, and paid to do this. And they tested out the idea of one in which they didn't have Kyle take the stand, and the other one in which they did have him take the stand. And the one where he did take the stand worked out a lot better, and so they decided that that would be the best tactic. So that is why they did that. As you notice, most of these lawyers on TV had recommended against it. But the interesting thing that the defense team, the main lawyer there, he kind of came out and said, that that in Wisconsin, apparently, you'd be best to, put the defendant on the stand. generally speaking, lawyers don't like it because something will come out in the questioning that then they can use against the defendant. They can find inconsistency, or the guy will make a mistake and say the wrong thing and so forth. And in fact, that's kind of one of the interesting things. The Tumblr issue was interesting too, that they mentioned the fact that that when Kyle had to draw 6 names out of people that would be removed from the jury, three of the names they picked were the ones that their jury expert had picked would be the most favorable to their case, and so that left them pretty nervous apparently. So that's kind of what's kind of going on. And that probably also emphasizes why they were continuing to be trying to push for a mistrial. Because I was kind of wondering, well, do you really want to go through this again? And it looked to me like the trial had gone pretty well favorable to their case as far as the presentation. I thought that the prosecution had a pretty lame case with several of their witnesses coming off more as defense witnesses. So anyway, that's kind of a little assessment of that trial. The 3 people that were shot, all had criminal records, and they were all basically rioters. But of course, a lot of this information was not available to the jury. It wasn't considered pertinent to the case by the way the law works. And I guess, we come across here generally feeling, well, the great old American jury system works. I've often been a little cynical about that, actually. And maybe that's my flaw, but, but nevertheless, in this case, it did. And, this is not the day to get into anything like that. I feel pretty good about it. And I hear that all the leftists are feeling pretty bad about it because they seem to want to make this guy into some kind of a white supremacist monster or something and make a big to-do about that, which of course is ridiculous. There's no evidence that he actually has any particular orientation towards any sort of racial prejudice or bias ideology at all. And of course, this is always the big Democrat lie that they keep throwing around. Apparently, this is a great weapon, and they've escalated to a level that's almost obnoxious. So I guess that's kind of my thoughts on the case there. I certainly hope that Kyle Rittenhouse has can get away from this for a while, although there's a lot of discussion about him filing a bunch of different kind of lawsuits. And I think in a sense maybe it would be beneficial to him, because it's kind of like, how does he actually transition to any kind of normal civilian life in the near term? Normal life. It's like, imagine if he tried to go to college, for instance, or to imagine if he, get a job, then you'd immediately have these jackals from the left, trying to get him fired or get him kicked out or, all that sort of thing. And so perhaps, trying to win a lawsuit against these media organizations that said all this defamatory information that was inaccurate would be a useful thing. And since he really wasn't really a truly public personality, like a movie star or a politician or something of that sort, major business CEO, something like that, it might actually be legally possible for him to be successful with that sort of a thing. And he might be able to get enough money to basically live the rest of his life off the earnings from that money. And that would be, beneficial. But on the other hand, I guess there's the idea of trying to slink into anonymity. I haven't heard of George Zimmerman in years. If you remember a similar high publicity case that I had some interest in at the time. Yeah. So, and I guess we'll just have to see what happens next on that. Some people have discussed he might sue President Biden. That's one I think he probably should shy away from, at least as long as the feds don't try to create some fake case against him, like Congressman Nadler was suggesting, because I just think that creates more negativity than he needs to get on. I'm no big fan of Biden, I think, as you've seen from these videos, but I think there's not that much money to be gotten from Biden. He's a millionaire, but he's not a multi-millionaire, whereas those big corporations like the ones behind CNN or MSNBC, they have a lot of money. And that's the whole thing in a tort case. Well, anyway, so I guess I just feel really good that he's off the hook there, not going to prison for who knows how long, potentially a life sentence. That was a heck of a thing. He's obviously under a lot of stress, and I think we can see from his reaction to verdicts that no, he wasn't faking it on the stand there either. I think it's pretty sincere, and there's a lot of trauma in that. I mean, as a young guy, I mean, he didn't really want to kill anybody. He was attacked, and I did make a tweet to say that I do give him a high mark for tactical effectiveness. I mean, I don't think most people could have got out of that as well as he could. I mean, anything could have gone wrong there. And the good news is he didn't hurt any innocent people in that whole thing. And trying to turn him into some kind of an active shooter maniac like the prosecution did was completely deceptive. And in fact, I think there's a lot of issue that can be brought against the prosecution, and maybe actually the acquittal might actually work to their advantage, that maybe people will just tend to drop the issue more, whereas if he were convicted and they were involved in an active defense, during the appellate court, there'd be a lot more motivation to bring up anything you could against them at that point, you see. So as it is, we'll see what happens. I kind of hope the DA in that town loses his next election, though. And hopefully somebody will be running against him. I mean, I think this really brings that prosecutor's office into real disrepute. Well, I guess I'll wrap that part of it up. I would like to quickly make a mention of the passage of what I call the Build Back Worse bill by the House yesterday, or this morning, actually. And it will be probably yesterday when you see this, or more. But like I said all along, I think this whole thing what was, as you can see now, they were able to get all but one of the Democrats to vote for it, which meant that, and all the Democrats were really for the first infrastructure bill, and the six were only holding out to pressure the other people into voting for the other one. And although they eventually caved, it was inevitable that both were going to pass the House anyhow in some form. And the good news is that the resistance from the Senate side has already greatly scaled back what they were originally planning. Now, it's not that good yet because you have a lot of programs that are going to end at artificial times, and they're the kind of programs that it's kind of hard to pull the plug on. I mean, if you start a pre-kindergarten program, right, it's pretty hard to have that run for 6 years or something and then just stop. That isn't the way it usually ends up. You'd have to it would be more likely to continue and so forth. And other programs of that sort too. Some of the other items like the global warming stuff, that probably could be cut back because it doesn't have the same degree of momentum to it in terms of voting reaction. And I think a lot of these programs also have the problem that they're being given to people that are making way too much money to need that kind of government assistance. It'd be one thing if it's focused just on the working poor, so as to be able to keep them in the workforce, and maybe that'd be one thing, but that's not what it all is. Well, I don't want to belabor it too much. It's going to go in the Senate, and we have no idea what our two recalcitrant senators, Manchin and Sinema, will do. Manchin still has some big objections, and I think since the global warming stuff kind of goes against his interests and interest of the state of West Virginia, that may have some trouble with him. So at any rate, I'll be wrapping this up now. You can, I have my addresses for my social media accounts on Twitter, Gab, and Parler below. And I guess this will be all for now, and until next time.